something bad to us, we are going to do things to you that have never been done before.
We the people tell the government what to do. It doesn't tell us. We the people are the driver. The government is the car. And we decide where it should go and by what route to do. We the people are free. And I hope we have once again reminded people that man is not free unless government is limited.
Well, g'day, folks. How are you? I hope you're having a pretty good sort of a day. I know the weather around here isn't too bad, but in other parts of the country, it's doing what it can do this time of year, i.e. cold, wet, windy. So if you're experiencing that, either hope you're rugged up or out of it or whatever. Good luck to you. Tonight, we've got a special guest coming in to have a bit of a chat because there is an exceptionally important piece of legislation that is going to be put through the House tomorrow, or House and Senate, I think, tomorrow. But to find out more about it, we've been able to get in contact with Robbie Barwick. Now, Robbie, you may have seen on social media, has put out an emergency message from and on behalf of the Australian Citizens Party asking for our help, and I think our help is very, very much needed. So without further ado, welcome, Robbie, to the show. Thanks for joining us, mate. I know you've got a very busy schedule and squeezing us in hasn't been easy, so I appreciate it.
No, happy to, Carl. It's an important issue, so get the word out everywhere.
Absolutely. So where do we stand? We're talking about the ASIO bill, a bill that was put forward some months ago and then passed by guillotine through the Senate, if memory serves, and then handed back for amendments, if you like, to the House. Those House amendments, I think, have been put forward. Where are we in the process?
All right. Well, it's not quite like that. This is a bill that is, when people hear the details of what's in it, they are shocked at that this kind of powers exist in Australia. Therefore, it's also shocking when you understand that back last year when there was a Senate inquiry into this legislation, there was only 6 submissions to that inquiry. And because the politicians didn't talk about it, the media, whose job it is to tell us what's going on, they didn't talk about it. And I feel bad because I've led a fight in my party on these kinds of laws since the early 2000s after 9/11, because the powers in this bill were originally legislated after 9/11 in 2003. And but I can't be on top of literally everything. And so I rely on the media to say, okay, there's a new bill up, right? And I didn't even see it. So when we caught wind of this in January, and I looked at how far it had progressed since then, I realized only 6 submissions. I mean, this is a shame. So let's go through what's in the bill, because just so people understand how serious this is.
Sure.
This is a bill that expands ASIO's what's called coercive questioning powers, which is another way of saying interrogation powers.
Yep.
Now, ASIO is a secret intelligence agency, Carl.
Yes.
The interrogation powers are by definition policing powers. When ASIO was first given these powers 23 years ago, the big reaction was, hang on, we are giving policing powers to a secret intelligence agency. We are creating a secret police. And that's essentially what we've had ever since. But we gave them to these powers on one condition, that they're only for counterterrorism, that ASIO needed to save us from, we're all shocked by 9/11. Remember what it was like, right? 9/11 changed our world, right? We all know that. We live in a post 9/11 world, and now a post COVID world. But, until COVID, 9/11.
We've had an update.
That's right. That's right. So, when people looked at the powers, they thought, you wouldn't do this under normal times. And the powers gave ASIO the right to grab anybody they liked. You don't even have to be a suspect, just anyone they want information from, including children as young as 14. And they can hold them for 7 days for interrogation without the right to silence and without the protection of the courts, meaning that ASIO doesn't need a warrant from a judge to do this. When police do this kind of grab people, they need a warrant from a judge. ASIO doesn't need a warrant from a judge to do this. If you don't answer ASIO's questions, you get up to 5 years in jail. if you're subjected to one of these interrogations and you tell people, you get up to 5 years in jail. Right? These are the powers of ASIO. Yeah. When they were first legislated, even the government at the time, John Howard was the Prime Minister, of course, but the guy in his party who did an inquiry into the bills, into the powers, said these have the potential to undermine democracy. All right, that's what he said. So 23 years later, they are expanding the powers that were just for counterterrorism, because everyone was convinced to say, okay, yes, you wouldn't accept these normally in a democracy, but we've just seen 9/11. In the middle of the debate on these powers, we had the Bali bombing, right? Terrorism is terrifying, right? Yep. And people say, okay, yes, I want my freedom, of course, but I'm willing to accept these kinds of powers to protect us from terrorism, right? Yeah, that's what that's what the logic was. Well, this bill expands the use of these interrogation powers to literally everything ASIO does, so it makes them routine for ASIO. ASIO can use as a matter of course for anything it's investigating, including really broadly worded things. Now, some of the things that ASIO has as its responsibility that it's being expanded to, one category is sabotage, so like defending, military sites, etc. That's pretty straightforward. But there's this one category of what ASIO investigates called promotion of communal violence. And the sticking point there is the word promotion, right? Because one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Now, and Fab, I am not advocating anything, right? I just want people to understand that this comes down to the interpretation. And so in whoever's hands at the time, these powers can be used quite arbitrarily. And I'll give you an example that people should look at in principle. Don't take a side on the example, just look at it in principle. There's been a lot of Palestine protests in Australia for the last couple of years.
Indeed.
There are people in the Jewish community who claim that wearing a keffiyeh, that black and white scarf, is a terrorist symbol. Yes. Therefore, that is the promotion. Wearing that is the promotion of communal violence. Right? Now, that's one section's view. Now, of course, it's actually remarkable. There's been remarkably, I would say, there's been remarkably little violence at those protests. There's been some heated stuff, right? But there's been a lot of protests for very little violence. But it doesn't have to be violent for people to say, I feel like it's violent, right?
That's right. So, now, feelings matter now, of course.
They do. So please don't, if you're on the other side of that issue, please don't react to, I'm just pointing out that this kind of interpretation comes down to people's perspective. And if you have in law powers that can be based on the attitudes of the people enforcing them, right, then this gets really broad. And you can, if ASIO can routinely grab people off the street to subject them to these kinds of powers, you've marched a long way down the path to authoritarianism. That's what's in this bill, and that's why we've been trying to highlight it all year. If I can just get a plug in right now before we discuss it more. So what we want to talk about today, Carl, is everyone who's listening to this who might be alarmed, we want you to get the details to call or email your senators and say, don't vote for this, because the vote is tomorrow. The vote is Thursday, the 20th. And what's happened is Labor and Liberal have done a deal to ram it through with a guillotine. So they suppress a debate. It's going to be no more than an hour, and then it's voted on. And because Labor and Liberal have done a deal, it's going to pass. So we have one day or less than 1 day now. So if you're watching this, we'll give you the details. Make phone calls to your senators, send emails, and help us to really put Parliament on notice they shouldn't pass this.
Absolutely. It's imperative that you contact every member and every senator in your state. And that's available by going to the website. I'll put it up in a crawl so that you can see that. I'll also post it in the comments so that you can click on it. you can choose to just do your state, I guess, or you could probably email them all, but they're
If you
not going
got
to read
time,
the ones that...
if you got time, if you got time, do them all, but definitely do your state.
Yep.
They're there to represent you. A lot of politicians, you know, if they get contacted by people who are not their constituents, they automatically ignore it because they do get a lot of contacts. So you've got leverage if they're your politicians in your state, and it's got to be the senators. By the way, if you've got time to call your House of Reps member, do that, or email them. But if you can, you especially do all the senators. You have 12 senators in the state, especially Labor and the coalition ones. The Greens are going to vote against this. One Nation have said they're going to vote against this, and the crossbench are going to vote against this. Right? This is one of those typically dirty uni-party deals.
I guess the question comes down to all of this. Oh, look, it's being done for our safety. You know, we've seen those mad people running around the streets with machetes and, you know, casting all sorts of aspersions on Christianity and white people and everything else. I mean, it's only being done, and who cares? It's only those sorts of people they're going to be coercing. Isn't that the thought that we're most worried people are going to go away with from this?
Yes, I'm very glad you asked that question because I was dealing with that logic 23 years ago when this first came up, right? Because 9/11 happened and the assumption was, oh, it's just for those kinds of people. Well, guess what? Laws aren't written that way. In fact, it's against the law to stipulate race or religion when you're passing a law. So you might think, and maybe whoever's running ASIO now will sincerely just use it against terrorism targets, but they are empowered by these laws to do it to anybody, and that's the problem. You don't put I remember a year. This has been a big fight, as I said, for a long time. When it was happening, there was a big post 9/11 reaction, right? America passed the Homeland Security Act, if you remember, right? Or no, sorry, the Patriot Act. Remember the Patriot Act? They set up the Department of Homeland Security. Every sort of government passed some form of national security law. Ours was John Howard put up a bunch of he put up a suite of 7 laws, and it was like this logic was, okay, there's a threat, we have to accept losing some liberties to protect us from the threat. And I think by now people are familiar with that argument, right? We've heard it very recently as well. So Ben Franklin had the best response to this, and that was from 250 years ago. The American founding father, right? He famously said, those who give up liberty for a little bit of security deserve neither liberty nor security. And it's just about being sensible. You put laws on the books that often outlast the people who put them there and the spirit in which they were passed, and you're giving powers to just say the current government is trustworthy. Usually they're not, but just say they are. You're giving you're giving powers to future governments who may not be trustworthy to just ride roughshod over all your rights. So there is an alternative to giving ASIO these powers, Carl, and that is to understand the nature of ASIO. ASIO is a secret intelligence organization. It is part of what Donald Trump called the deep state. Right? This Five Eyes apparatus that ASIO is part of, that sets itself as this power above government. Really, they're subject to very little democratic accountability, and so these powers are serious to start with. If you give them to an unaccountable secret organization, you really are setting yourself up for trouble. Whereas
it's an organization that has a lot of question marks over it because while you and I, as average Australians, are not allowed into their new, well, it's not so new now, I suppose it was opened a few years back, but the new ASIO headquarters in Canberra, the Prime Minister, I think it was, or the Premier Herzog from Israel when he was here, was glad-handed, along with his security team, right into the heart of ASIO's HQ. And this happened not long after the Bondi adventure.
No, exactly. And it really raised eyebrows. It's like, well, hang on. What is this agency that they roll out the red carpet? Like, they're supposed to be a secret agency.
Interestingly, isn't a member of Five Eyes.
No, that's right. But that's always a bit of an inside joke with Five Eyes, right? Because clearly the way politics, our politics works is there's a very, very, very close relationship with Israel. They probably structured it for plausible deniability, to be honest. But yeah, no, ASIO has real questions. The other thing about ASIO is it has become this very vocal, very public organization under the current boss, Mike Burgess, in a way that has broken the mold from his predecessors. So Burgess is the spy chief. Probably everyone recognizes that face now that you put it up. And I would argue you shouldn't be able to recognize that face. But he has become a publicity whore, this guy, because he gets to say things that are all about keeping us scared. You know, he'll give a speech. He does an annual threat assessment, right? And he'll give a speech talking about, there's a nest of spies in Australia. And he let people believe for a couple of years, because it was based on the narrative of the time, that it was Chinese spies. Turned out it was not Chinese spies, it was Indian spies. And that should raise eyebrows, because he admitted there were a nest of Indian spies in Australia. That was his claim. But everyone saw Modi come to Australia last month and get fated down here in Melbourne. I'm in Melbourne.
Absolutely.
At Marvel Stadium, right? So what sort of game are they playing there? I would argue, now I'm going to take the smile off my face a bit, because this is a more serious allegation I'm about to make. Last year, when Mike Burgess gave that announcement about Iran supposedly being behind the arson attacks in Sydney and Melbourne.
Yes.
Now, I called BS on it straight away.
Yeah, me too.
Our view is that he was just being a propagandist for Mossad by doing that. It was admitted the so-called intelligence came from Mossad. This was a grave insult to, give us a break. Iran is a serious, look what it's done to America now, right? Iran is a serious country. They're not going to waste their time doing, the arson attack at the synagogue down here in Melbourne was kind of serious, but the one on a Jewish deli in Bondi was pathetic, right? Iran's not going to waste its time doing that. But let me tell you something more serious about it. Iran is an enemy of ISIS, a vowed enemy, right? When there was a big war against ISIS in the 2010s, it was the Iranian-backed Shia that did the majority of the fighting. Our special forces over in Iraq worked with the Iranian-backed Shia to fight ISIS. The perpetrators of the Bondi massacre, who are known to ASIO, were pro-ISIS, not pro-Iran. They were pro-ISIS. Yet in the months leading up to that attack, a real terrorist attack, he was telling everyone to look the other way because Israel gave him the intelligence that told him to. And this guy fired for his catastrophic failure to protect Australians and the kinds of games he played, because as the boss of the agency whose job it is to protect us from terrorist attacks, and he has the powers to do it, right? He was playing propaganda games instead. He should be fired. Instead, Albanese is rewarding him with a massive expansion of his powers.
There are also a lot of questions about Australian passports that were used in assassinations of some figures in the Middle East. And those passports were discovered to be Australian passports, but the people travelling on them were found to be Israeli. This was presided over as well by ASIO under Mr. Burgess's tenure. How often do we let this get away? And is there any recourse for the Australian people to question ASIO in any way, shape, or form?
No, this is the problem. So the one they always claim that these intelligence agencies have parliamentary oversight, but the parliamentary oversight is very restricted and it's not good enough. There's also one other form of oversight, which is called the Inspector General. But when the Inspector General does look at ASIO's dealings and writes reports, they are classified. So they're not open to public scrutiny. So the only chance you got is to see if Parliament does its job. Well, ASIO does appear before Senate estimates. But what I detect in Senate estimates is that very few senators actually question him. When he's before Senate estimates, the rest are kissing his butt. They're giving leading questions for him to grandstand on his views, right?
Yep.
So David Shoebridge, and look, full disclosure, I'm in the Citizens Party. I'm not the Greens Party, and we're certainly not Greens at all. But what I have learned to do in politics is where I find common ground with people, I'm happy to work with them and actually acknowledge their contribution. So the Greens is probably not everyone's cup of tea, but David Shoebridge is a barrister, and he's quite accomplished. He's quite an accomplished interrogator in his own right, but of the right people in public in these Senate estimates forums. And he gets Burgess in front of him, and he really asks him questions, and he's the only one who does. Now, there's a dedicated committee, though, Carl, that's there to oversee ASIO, and it's called the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security. There is so as a joint committee, it's senators and members of the House of Reps. Outside of Shoebridge, there's one guy in Parliament who is head and shoulders above everybody else with having intelligence expertise and integrity, and that's Andrew Wilkie. Because Andrew Wilkie was the guy who worked as an intelligence analyst for the Office of National Assessments and was one of the few people in the world who resigned over the lies of weapons of mass destruction before the Iraq War. He saw that his agency was just putting out lies the government wanted, right? And he became a whistleblower and went public. And that's how he made a name for himself. Do you know Labor and Liberal will not let Andrew Wilkie within a bull's roar of that Parliamentary Joint Committee? He's not allowed to be on it, right? They have a closed shop, and they will only have Labor and Liberal senators on there who are going to kiss this guy's butt. And therefore, there is no oversight there whatsoever. And therefore, the Australian public can have no confidence that he is being asked the hard questions about his claims and his activities that are supposed to be keeping us safe.
Australians really have no way of getting any knowledge out of this at all, because the bureaucracy are the key holders in all of this, the gatekeepers, and certainly the holders of the keys to where the deepest secrets are buried. Let's say, for instance, one nation were to be put forward and allowed to lead the country, or let's say the Australian Citizens Party, for something miraculous happens in the next couple of years, and all of a sudden public support comes behind you guys, and the gates of Parliament are open to you. Wouldn't you be lost without those same bureaucrats that you'd have to deal with?
Yeah, but you'd want to be. So if you know. I'll tell you now, if you know that you're getting close to power and it becomes a possibility, this is the most important thing to prepare for. And I think the cautionary tale, or the learning curve that you should learn from, is what happened to Donald Trump when he got elected in 2016 before he was inaugurated, because he was talking about all this kind of stuff. He was the first time I saw Donald Trump as a I think the guy's a con man in many ways. Sorry, I just do. But the reason I say that is because they all are, but he's transparent about it. And what he was prepared to do in 2016 is call out a lot of stuff everyone knew was true. He called out the deep state, but he also called out the lies about the Iraq war, that sort of thing. And he became a very interesting person to me. So the night he got elected, when it was the choice between him and Hillary, and I'm not an American, of course, I was very happy he got elected. But I've got some good friends in America, and I was getting their insights into how the transition went. And because he wasn't prepared, Carl, right, he did not have people to fill the key spots in government that he could trust. And therefore he went in there to drain the swamp, remember, and then the claim came that the swamp drained him. He was susceptible to that. So I can't tell you what One Nation is prepared for, but I know, because our party has done so much work on the history of these intelligence agencies, that we would identify where the key pressure points are and have things ready to go to counteract that. So the lower level public servants, right, not going to have an issue with them. It's these department heads and deputies, etc. All of them on a bloody $1 million. They're way too overpaid anyway.
Absolutely.
They're the ones that will be, okay, move on. We're bringing in our own people, even if that means you bring in some longer in the teeth people, the people who got passed over for because they weren't ass kissers or whatever. for many years, right? There's lots of good, honest people in government structures and departments, and because you're going to need people who know what to do. We've got to kick out the consultants who've taken over, right? They are just parasites. Kick them all out. We want to bring back serious public servants, and we want to bring back people that you can actually trust. So when I say the pressure points, I know dealing with the first thing I would do, I have a One Nation friend that I argue with about this. The first thing I would do is sack Mike Burgess, have someone from outside ready to go, because I know the history. Do you know when MI5 came to Australia in 1949 and said to Ben Chifley, we want you to set up a branch of MI5, which is what became ASIO. ASIO is a branch of MI5, British intelligence. Yep. Ben Chifley's first reaction was, we don't want a secret police here. And then they sort of ran a scam on him, and they conned him into accepting the necessity for it. And that put us down on this path to a deep state. So I would be happy to get rid of ASIO entirely and replace its function with police intelligence and military intelligence, because they in their own way are part of accountable structures, right? I was going to make this point before. What we're advocating by opposing these powers for ASIO is not to make strip Australia of any security capacity. But if you need to have powers to interrogate people to get information about an impending terrorist attack, if that's so important, and you can understand this, it's actually not as common a scenario as people think. It's a bit of a myth, the ticking time bomb. But anyway, just say it is important. It would be far better that police do it, who are part of an accountable, transparent structure, right? That later on it can be all made transparent, etc. Because these are such extreme powers, than giving them to a secret agency that has no accountability. Right? That would be far better. And I would advocate that's what should happen. And I've been consulting with high-level counterterrorism police about this, because, you know, I'm conscious of not advocating something that just sounds like all Pollyanna-ish and that there is no such thing as terrorism threats. Of course there are. We had a terrorist attack in Bondi. You know, so but you got to understand what's a principled approach in a democracy versus what puts us down the path to authoritarianism, which is what these ASIO powers do.
Sure do. So here is an email, or not an email, a website you can go to. That will take you directly to the senators and members lists. You just click on the state that you're in, and you'll be able to find your appropriate members and senators in there with their contact email addresses. Now, I've had a bit of a go at this today, and I've discovered that a number of the members do not have email addresses listed, but it's not too hard to figure out what their email address is. They will have a parliamentary email address. It will be exactly the same as every other parliamentary email address, which will be their name separated by a full stop. Yep. And after their surname, there'll be a full stop, and MP, if they're a member of parliament, at the rest of the address. So you can fill it in for yourself if you find that you haven't got it there. Tell us a bit more about your party. Like the Australian Citizens Party is something that I think, broadly speaking, a lot of the people watching this show would love to support. What makes you different from any other political party that sticks their head up?
Oh, well, we're not a modern splinter party. We've been around 38 years, actually. And that comes with a lot of experience. We also have, look, when I started in this party 33 years ago. I've been around a while as well. I got into politics as a young guy. Over time, you learn the difference between opinion and fact. I'm not disrespecting people's opinion, but if you're serious about changing the problems, you need to know what they really are. Right, and what the actual solutions are, and that takes a lot of work, a lot of research, research.
Takes a bit of personal honesty too, doesn't it? People sometimes don't want to recognise the truth, or don't want to admit it. No, of course,
because we have prejudices, we have biases, right? You get. I mean, there's things I've been. You get angry about things, and then you realise later, I misunderstood that. I will tell you this. And take it as you will, but one of my most important experiences in politics was getting involved in regularly going to Canberra and lobbying members of parliament, and realizing, and this is a fundamental discovery that I made, it's my discovery, but you can believe me or not. I will never ever take the media caricature of a politician at face value again. I always want to reserve my judgment until I meet that person for myself, because the media caricature has never been right, in my opinion.
No.
Right? When I've met these guys, I've realized, I had a totally different impression of what you were like from the media. And I've even, I talk about this a lot. I've even had left-wing people who, out of necessity, have had to go to Parliament and meet someone like Malcolm Roberts, who is a One Nation senator, and of course, way over on the far right, according to the left-wing media, etc.
According to them, yes, he's gone off the rails.
Yeah. So they have said to me they were blown away by what he was like in person, because they just had this caricature of them, right? What we've discovered over time is that most members of Parliament are pretty decent people personally. Doesn't mean they're in there doing good. They're captured by a system. They're captured by machines. And most of them are not up to the actual job of truly representing Australia, because it's not their fault they got in there with they got in there with the right intention, right? But they've quickly find out there's no way you can act on that intention. Now we've just had some bad news ourselves. We've spent the last few months working on a merger with Jared Rennick's People First Party, and we've hit a technical snag, and unfortunately won't be able to go ahead. So we'll work closely with Jared in an alliance instead. But Jared Rennick is an example of a guy who went into Parliament with all the best intentions and some real ability, and he just ran into a system that was not interested in implementing real solutions. And so our main approach as a political, what sets us apart is we would love to do better at elections. We don't wait for elections to do our work. We are constantly intervening in the parliamentary process on issues like this and forcing Parliament to do things otherwise wouldn't do. And this is an example. In February, when any bill that's got Labor and Liberal support is always going to pass. This bill was supposed to be waved through in February. Thanks to our intervention, by just putting a spotlight on it, suddenly posts were being put up everywhere where people are looking at the details of this bill and being truly shocked. And then contacting members of Parliament. And I found, I take a bit of credit for this. I know what Anthony Albanese's like. And I went, when this bill was put up, and I knew about the original debate in 2003 when these original laws were there just for counter-terrorism. And I remember Labor was opposed to them. We influenced them to be opposed to them. We lobbied them heavily to oppose these laws powers at the time. And knowing what Anthony Albanese's like, before Albo became a sort of someone with large authority in the parliamentary structure, he was more of a firebrand. And I went back and found his speech in 2003 on these ASIO powers. And he opened that speech by quoting Hermann Goering, Adolf Hitler's Reichsmarshal, and he compared these powers to the Nazis. 23 years later, he's the guy who's expanding them. And when we released that video of Albanese, the two Albaneses, right, the guy who compared them to the Nazis and now the one expanding them, people were just shocked from one end of Australia to the other. So the major parties went into damage control. And what they're doing now is they've decided it's too much trouble to allow proper debate. They're going to guillotine the debate tomorrow so that they can just get it passed without too much controversy being expressed in the chamber. And someone said to me, well, because the debate's going to be about an hour, and someone said to me, well, an hour seems like a long time to have a debate. Well, here's the contrast, Carl. When these powers were first put up in 2002, it took 15 months for them to pass, 15 months of fierce debate, including the last sitting day of 2002 broke a record. It went from 9 o'clock in the morning until 12 o'clock midday the next day, 27 hours straight. Parliament sat for debating one subject, these powers for ASIO. In the middle of the night, Simon Crean's up there as the leader of the opposition, denouncing John Howard and accusing him of establishing a police state. Kim Beazley's giving, he's a backbencher. He's giving a speech at about 1 a.m. in the morning, right? On these boards, there was this fierce back and forth between the Senate and the House because they couldn't pass them without Labor's support in the Senate, right? And so Parliament was in a total gridlock. That's a debate. The same powers, but on a much more expanded scale. They are using this dirty trick of a guillotine to cram the debate into an hour so they can then shut it down and get the bill through.
An exemplary example of the kind of people that we've managed to elect to represent us in Canberra.
Yep.
It's quite sad. These ASIO laws, you've already explained the dangers to them. How might it be used, do you think, there has been a lot of news over the last few years about common law groups and some reference to sovereign citizens. I guess Desi Freeman is one of the better examples more recently of that, sadly. These powers, do you expect these common law groups to be approached by ASIO and have these used against them?
Well, look, ASIO, I do know ASIO looks at those groups. So the bottom line is anyone ASIO looks at can be subject to these powers. That's the bottom line. So, but look, I'll state my position. I'm at odds with the common law stuff. I don't take that position on things. But you know, there's been some bad incidents, right? And so it gets dicey. But then this is where when you get into these dicey areas, it's made worse by the fact that ASIO is a secret intelligence agency.
And there is no public scrutiny. No scrutiny.
Yeah. So there'll be, if ASIO screws up, there'll be an Inspector General report, inquiry and report, and no one will ever see it. Right? It's not good. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. I know. And so you take it already dicey situation, you make it far, far worse. Right. Yeah. People should not take the law into their own hands and do all those kinds of things. But one issue, and again, look, without elaborating, I just don't agree with that kind of approach. But what I do the part I do understand is the lack of trust in government, right? And I personally think you actually cannot be a civilized society if you can't trust you got to, like, whether you want big government or small government, you want government to be good government, because you've got to have some
accountable government.
Accountable government, right?
Yep.
And if you can't trust them because of all the crap they've done, it's really incumbent on the government to recognize that and work hard to get that trust back by doing real things. You don't get it back by censoring the people who say that you can't be trusted. That's been their approach so far, right? And so there are other ways to address some of these problems than just more and more laws. And even if we get off that subject for a second, even if you look at something more straightforward, seemingly like terrorism and Islamist terrorism, right? Because that's, Islamism is most associated with terrorism in modern times. But you look as old as me. You look as old as me, Carl. In the 80s, we weren't talking about Islamic terrorism that much. We were talking about Catholic terrorism by these Irish people, right? The IRA.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not an exclusive thing, but in our area, it's been much more common. But I can tell you, I've done the research on this. I've consulted the top cops in their field. You got to put aside prejudice. The majority of people in the Muslim community, they don't want to be victims of terrorism either, right? There's been terrorist cells in Australia that they all get kicked out of the mosques all around the country because the mosques won't have a bar of them. They've got to go start their own little special thing, right? Yep. And if governments were serious about combating that kind of terrorism, they would see the community as an asset and work with them, right, and use their information, etc., rather than take a combative approach. And the police forces have been much more successful in taking that approach and getting information and acting on very specific ways against real terrorists than ASIO has with these kinds of powers, which are really threatening and scary to people and intimidating, where they do these public raids and all this kind of stuff, right? So you either have a police state approach or you have a targeted police approach. And I think if we want to be a functioning democracy, you want to have a targeted police approach, which actually assumes that most people are not criminals, whether you're someone who wants to rethink the Constitution and living in Central Australia, you have every right to rethink the Constitution. You may not have much success in changing. It's a hard thing to change, but just because you want to rethink it doesn't make you a threat to the country, or whether you're someone living in Southwest Sydney, right? You should assume people are law abiding and do a targeted approach, and you don't need these kinds of powers if you do.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine why you need these kinds of powers if your security services are doing what they're meant to be doing, and that's sitting in the background getting all the intel. I mean, yes, by all means, jump out of your van and arrest people if they're about to commit a crime, but if there has been no crime committed, I find these powers particularly heinous because not only can they, and as you said at the beginning, anybody from 14 years old up can be taken. Now, they can be taken for 7 days with no notice and no requirement to notify anybody. What happens to the parents of a 14-year-old, let's call it boy, who has been taken by ASIO under this system? He's just taken off the streets. Do we get a week's worth of Amber Alerts? No. Basically says, "Oh no, he's dead."
Now you're right. Look, you're right to ask that question. Because this is not your fault, but there were some videos that were because a lot of analysis has got around about this bill. That was one little detail that was wrong. So when it comes to minors, unlike adults who are not allowed to tell anybody and they're on their own, they can have a legal representative who can't say anything, and ASIO can kick them out. And the legal representative can't say. The legal representative can just basically be an observer in the room. They can't advise their client how to answer or whatever, but
and could be used as a witness going forward for you.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
But with minors, one of their parents or guardians has to be there, right? But both of them are under the same restriction of not to tell anybody for fear of 5 years in prison. Now, have you ever told a 14-year-old to keep a secret?
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Now, here's the weirdest part about these powers, Carl. This is serious, and it was Senator David Pocock who highlighted this. I already knew it, but he highlighted in his speech he was one of two senators that was able to start an earlier debate on these powers. A year before the election, ASIO made a submission to the relevant department and said, "We do not need our interrogation powers to apply to minors because we've never used that." That was ASIO's own position. They had the 2025 election. Straight after the election, ASIO changed its position, and we don't know. Don't know why.
Maybe that's where Albo got it. We've changed our position.
Yeah, but it's a strange thing to change their position on, right?
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
The agency itself advocated, look, we've never used it in more than 20 years. We don't need it because it is, when anything that involves kids gets quite controversial.
Sure does.
For some unknown reason, there was some order from on high to say, "No, we're going to keep those powers, and you, ASIO, have to justify having them." So it's definitely a strange one. But still, even if your parent or guardian's there, kids should not be subjected to these kinds of things. Just if you think the kid has information, the cops. It's up to the cops to know who's who. If we had more cops actually on the beat rather than doing paperwork, where your neighborhood, right? People connected to their neighborhood do the policing, right? But you saw in COVID how that would be inconvenient to the powers that be. If your policing is done by people who are part of the community and have to answer to the community, that's its own form of accountability, right? You get more instant respect that way, but you can't get too heavy-handed with that kind of policing. And they want to have the ability to get heavy-handed, and so they bring in this different kind of police system, right? And they can get overruled by ASIO.
Mate, it's very dangerous. What do you suggest people put in an email when they write to their senators and members in the next, 24
12
hours,
hours.
12 hours. It needs to happen in the next 12 hours.
Do it this evening or first thing in the morning. And if you haven't done it,
Yep.
finish it by this evening, do it first thing in the morning. You keep doing it up until lunchtime. Look, just state your individual firm opposition to these powers, and you think that they should be scrapped. Now, I don't. That's generally all I want to say. The reason for that is, when you sit down and put it into your own words, you don't have to. It doesn't have to be a long email or anything like that. If you want to make a long email, go ahead. Right. What matters at a time like this is volume, not how eloquent you are. Right. Understand you are part of an army of people all around Australia that are bombarding them all at once. One of the best piece of advice we got from a politician years ago, like 30 years ago, he said, politicians don't read letters, they count them.
Yeah.
And what they do in this modern period, they see through form letters straight away. So they'll discount form letters. If I gave you, if I had suggested to you, Carl, look, take these 3 sentences and everyone use them, right? Every politician within 3 or 4 emails will realize, okay, that's a form letter campaign. If they get instead all these emails and phone calls, and here's a good thing to do. If you're a bit nervous about calling, it's always good to call. If you're a bit nervous about calling, send an email and then just call up and ask if they tell them you just want to find out if they received it. Right? You don't have to say anything. But if the phone starts ringing off the hook, right? And I think we're generating that. I'm pretty happy that we are.
Yeah, good.
This same politician said to us, if we get a letter or an email, we know that there's like a tip of the iceberg principle they look at. We said if we get a letter or an email, we know that people who are concerned about an issue, and they probably represent at least 100 other people in the community who are concerned about that issue. He said, if we get a phone call, we know that they represent about 500 people in the community that are concerned about that issue. If we get a visit, if someone comes to our office and visits us, we know they probably represent about 1,500 people in the community that are concerned about that issue, right? And these because they're all about getting reelected. And so these numbers matter. And so that's why we always encourage people, send an email, but make a phone call, right? If you're up to it, make a phone call. And if you're lucky, the phone will be engaged because we're generating so many phone calls. But otherwise, if they answer, just say your piece, saying, "Look, I'm calling to tell you, I think you should oppose the ASIO bill," and they will be reporting back to their bosses, "Hey, we are getting a lot of heat on this ASIO bill," right? And then the backbenchers will be saying to Elbow, "Fearless leader, we never doubt your wisdom, but this time we might because we're getting nervous."
I'm having a few problems at my end. You're starting to drop out a little bit, so I don't know if it's
okay.
My connection.
I think we've covered it. I think we've covered it.
I think we have. I just want to thank you again for taking the time for coming on tonight. I know it was a late call to get you on, and it was nice of you to make a hole in your schedule so that you can come and join us. I really appreciate it. And by all means, let's stay in touch. If there's anything further that we can do to try and help forward the Citizens Party, I think a lot of us are looking for somewhere where we can put a vote and put it behind conscientious people who actually are determined to do the right thing by the community. And if that means getting elected and taking hold of the bureaucracy by the scruff of the neck, then that's what it means. So very, very keen to help anywhere we can.
Excellent. Thanks, Carl. Appreciate you having me on.
No problems at all. Stay safe. And coming up, folks, got a few more things to let you in on tonight. There's been some interesting developments coming out of America, and there has also been a lot of rather weird story. Well, hang on. We'll get to it right after this. Oh, there I am hiding down the corner. Always happens when I hit the wrong button. Interesting chat. Thank you very much again to Robbie for spending some time with us. And certainly if you are feeling the mood to get involved, then emailing your senator, I guess, in your state, all the senators in your state, but all the members should be mailed as well. It is the Liberal and the Labor Party who've done this dirty backroom deal that's going to see this new amendment put forward and give ASIO these unlimited powers, it seems. And yes, to everybody who argues that, oh, look, if you've done nothing wrong, you've got nothing to worry about. Well, that's pretty simple too, I suppose, until those laws get extended, overreached. And it's been shown that over just my lifetime, where I've taken even from the remotest interest in politics, the changes that have occurred have been minute, but over 40 years, 50 years, they add up to a position that I could never have predicted Australia would be in 50 years ago. And I bet you feel exactly the same way. It is really quite insane. Quite insane. All right, a couple of quick things before we go tonight. Here is something interesting. There is talk that the Benghazi files are going to be declassified. Now, when I say there's talk, there's been a few posts about it from various different people, and nobody from the Department of Defense, or the Department of War, I think as it's now known, has said anything, because there is a story about Pete Hegseth that has been taking the headline space, I guess, and that is that apparently he's had a falling out with Donald Trump, and that, well, we can expect some consequences from that falling out. Whether that means that there is an end in the war or an upscale in the war with Iran, we shall wait and see. Also put out today, the president said the Census Bureau has begun checking voter records from 2020 against their citizenship records. On the first 128 million voters, the Census Bureau proves that over 24,000 non-citizens voted illegally. The Census Bureau is going to analyse the next 32 million voters, and this number will explode. I won the election. We must pass the Save America Act. Thank you for attention to this matter. The Save America Act is essentially legislation that means Americans will need to physically ID themselves before being able to vote. That means you'll have to show a license or something to show that you are an eligible citizen to vote. There have also been huge numbers quoted. I haven't mentioned them to you because I'll be honest, they're pretty hard to believe. But the number of dead people who vote in American elections is not tens of thousands. It's not hundreds of thousands. It's millions. Millions of dead people vote in elections every year. Now, this has been discovered, and part of the Save America Act is to make sure that all of those names, which I believe are being removed under Donald Trump, the Save America Act will make sure that they can't be put back on the list, or that anybody who dies in the future stays on the eligible list. So it's a very, very important act, and it is something that Donald Trump needs to get through and needs to get sorted if we are to move forward with any form of arrests of those people who he perceives, and everybody who agrees with him, perceives did wrong by the 2020 election, where Donald Trump was robbed. Now, Trump claims to have the physical proof. He can prove it. Yes, there have been Supreme Court decisions that say they don't care about the truth. They're just going with the leftists, and under Biden's tutelage or control, at least while he was president, the Supreme Court of the United States was absolutely 100% controlled. It does seem to be changing now, and there are reports of decisions made by the court some years ago that have been kept in camera or quiet until the appropriate time. One of those decisions was a Supreme Court decision to overturn the election results of 2020. But they have not released that to the public yet. We've heard tales of this over the last few years, of whether it's going to happen or not. But well, I guess we will just have to wait and see. Now, before I go this evening, there are a couple of short things I want to play you. I want you to remember what happened during COVID. A lot of people are starting to feel a little bit, you know, it was a while ago. We're still living, live and let live. And I agree, live and let live, but never, ever forget what they tried to do. Now, this is a pretty, I'm giving you this one because I want you to have a smile. But remember around this time what they were telling you to do.
A vital part of preparing for hurricane season is to get vaccinated now. Everything is more complicated if you're not vaccinated in a hurricane.
I'm going to play a few more of those bits for you, probably tomorrow night. I don't think we'll have time tonight. But it is unbelievable how people have seemed to forget the position that we, the unvaccinated, were put in, how we were treated. There were calls for us to be jailed. There were calls for us never to be allowed out in public again. We were ostracized by work colleagues. Families abandoned us, friends abandoned us. And they all gave us that pitying look like, oh, I thought you were smarter than that. You know, I don't know how many times I had people tell me that. Funnily enough, those people aren't talking to me too much anymore, which is sad, because accountability is something that we all need in our life if we are ever going to lift our vibration and become something better. While people continue to turn a blind eye, to, you know, conveniently forget what they said and what they did, and most of all, to go on without apologizing for it, I find that the most insulting thing of all out of it. All it takes is an apology, an admission that you were wrong and possibly we were right. That doesn't mean to throw yourself prostrate on the ground and beg our forgiveness. That isn't the way it has to work. But we need to see that you understand. We need to see that you are aware, so that next time this happens, you won't be hard to convince when those of us who see it stand up early and sound the warning. We need to see that you understand when that time comes, you have to stand up like we are. Hopefully that's happening. Speaking of standing up, a gentleman I know you all love and support unconditionally made the trip to Hervey Bay yesterday for Vietnam Veterans Day. Ben Robert Smith, VCMG, gave a walk around the town, ran into a lot of people at the park, and then had a chat with a lot of people, I'm assuming at the RSL, but it might have been just at a local club. I'm not quite sure. Somebody recorded that and put it up on their Facebook today, and I've stolen it. But here is what Ben Robert Smith had to say about getting a VC.
But when people say that to me about, you know, you got the VC, it's such a great honour, I think about the 7th of August in 1915. That was the Battle of the Neck, accurately. It's the 3rd Light Horse Brigade. 3 waves of soldiers running towards Turkish positions were machine gunned down. The first one, everyone died. The second stood up and went when the whistle blew, and they all died. The third stood there knowing they were going to die, put their wedding rings on their bayonets into the walls of the trenches. They left their possessions there because they knew before the whistle went they were not going to make it. It was the size of 3 tennis courts. And the whistle went and they ran and they all died. So you want to talk about Victoria Crosses? Well, there isn't a man in that group of people that should not have been awarded the Victoria Cross for giving their life for their mates. And that's what they said they did it for.
Did you catch that last line of what he said? That's what they said they would do. They being the government. That's what the government said they would do. They would recognise every one of those men who jumped out of the trench and sacrificed themselves, knowing they were going to die. I don't know how many of them got the VC, but They certainly all didn't, I don't think. Very, very sad. All right, folks, have yourself a good night. Looking forward to tomorrow night. Is today Thursday? I'm pretty confident it's Thursday. If it's not, it's Wednesday. So there you go. I'm a day ahead. I don't know. Head's all over the place at the moment. I needed to have a reasonable sleep. Maybe that might help. I'll have to ask Vince how to get some of that. Always remember this. And there are dickheads everywhere.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back. Does anybody else want to stay? Let's ride!